Rabbi Vogel, you said before about those of us, Baruch Hashem, Lubavitch Chassidim, we're on the other side.
Pardon?
That we are on the other side. Azayat
Yeah.
Right? And you said this behemshech to the fact that to be masbir to the world, as the Rebbe left Heint, Yatim B'chayoi is not exactly something that necessarily people will understand, but we are on the other side. The Poyol, Hey Tevis, the whole shturim of Hey Tevis, all the sikhs that the Rebbe spoke from that very first sikha that you mentioned, and Yud-Beis Tammuz, following them Tesvov Tammuz, etc., that was the message. The message was, and the Rebbe was then, as you very, very, very special words expressed, the Rebbe's pain, etc., but the Rebbe, the Akoponim on the surface of it, the message was as Hu B'chaim and Yatim B'chayoi. So obviously back then we were listening to the Rebbe say this, but on shlichus and on as shluchim, and we're all shluchim in one way or another, every chassid. So
every Jew.
Right. So how lepoil do you explain it? Do you, Rabbi Vogel, explain Yatim B'chayoy, or however you want to word it? This is Hey Tevis. Hey Tevis is the continuity. This is not just a few svarim, as you said. It's much more than that. So wie teichman das so ist lepoil in Mishnah. In Drusen the Welt, to unser eigene Nefesh HaBahamis, and then through that to everyone else.
Well, all I can do is repeat, not what I've said, but find new expressions of explanation. One of the earliest, when they were talking about what is Hasidus, because one of the great treasures which we have is in Yonah Shel Teis HaChasidus, right? You're familiar, I'm sure, with in Yonah Shel Teis HaChasidus. But let me tell you a story about that. I'll come back to the language we choose. In Yonah Shel Teis HaChasidus was spoken on Yutes Kislev, delivered by the Rebbe, Tov Shin Chof Hey, 1964. I remember it because
Rabbi Vogel, it was Tov Shin Chof Vov.
Tov Shin Chof Vov, you're right. That's 1965, correct.
It's Chaim Pharaoh.
Oh, Chaim, Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem Shalom. How are you?
I'm Baruch Hashem. Well, how are you?
I thank the Meibishten, Baruch Hashem, very well. All the better for hearing your Verbringen.
And all the better for meeting you. So Chaim Pharaoh, verstehe that was Gieten, because Chaim Pharaoh was around, he's been around for quite a time, so maybe he'll justify this remark or not.
Pfizish, it was my first Yutes Kislev in Lubavitch.
Is that right? Well, I'll use that in further speeches.
I must tell you something. I felt that the gashmius of the walls was melting away as the Rebbe spoke these sikhs.
Well, so let's get this right. That was your first verbrengen Uteskis.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. We must have been standing on different parts of the room.
And
The first.
I was in 770. I was in 770 because of Rabbi Peyvish Vogel.
Right. Okay. Look, Okay. Okay. So let's put that aside. I'm just trying. I once told somebody, and he got very upset with me. I said, I'm listening to every word you say. And he took it as a criticism. Meaning to say, listening to every word you say, and I want to go on to the next point. You said you felt as if the walls were melting away. Well, that indicates a kind of a poetic personality, which I'm not, okay. Something of that sort. Well, let me tell you what I thought. It's interesting, two perspectives. This sikha lasted, as far as I remember, about 2 hours or 2 hours and 5 minutes.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't one sikha.
Okay, look, it lasted a long time. I saw a gap in the middle. Anyway, so the first part, I think I understood. Not really, but I think I understood. And the second part, what I thought, this is something unique. This is something special. So I will always remember this very special sikha, which I didn't understand. And I knew I was in the presence of greatness. Fast forward, over the years, I gave shiurim in the Anshe Hasidus. I even Zola Hobna Lichtige Ganeden, Jonathan Sachs. I asked him after he'd finished learning with me the Kutisichas. He chose from Aleph till right through till Tes. So after that, I asked him to translate in Yonashal Tersa Hasidus, which he did. And he not only translated the liquid itself, but he wrote his own personal introduction, which was breathtaking. When I turned westwards to New York to investigate the possibility of printing, I was informed somebody has pipped you to the post. This is from Buffalo, Rabbi Gurari, who got a lady professor from Maryland University, I've got her name, and she'd done the translation.
Susan Handel.
Correct, Susan Handelman, right. Now, so that remained for posterity. I was thinking of retrieving it, but like everything else, I just mislaid it somewhere. So I'm in the throes of now trying to rediscover it. Anyway, let's keep the point. In Yonashal Teresa Hasidus was a milestone. That which was understood before was not understood until that moment. I don't know, maybe other people didn't see it that way, but I saw it that way. And I'll tell you a Maisa, which you may have heard or not. Rabbi Alti Bukit, who lives in Shlichus in Lexington, neighboring Boston, was once driving and he saw at the bus stop a man who he knew. So he stopped to give him a lift, and he actually gave him a lift. His name was Rabbi Isidore Twersky, a son-in-law of the great Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik. And he says, so he was in the car for some time, and he said to him, I'll tell you a Maisa about the Rebbe, which you don't know. Okay. Excuse me. I'll tell you a Maisa about the Rebbe, which you don't know. What's the Maisa? Being a son-in-law of the Rav, JB, he used to go have supper on Friday night. Every Friday night, he went for supper. So, had the meal, and not them, gesessen, a posho. And what was he doing? Getting learning. We're talking learning the whole time, 2 or 3 hours. One Shabbos, the Shver of Rabbi Twersky turns around to him and says, look, I want to tell you something. Ich habe meine Chassidus from the Rebbe, so I want you to take a nap on Friday afternoon. So you should be really awake, because I'd like to learn this Sikha, this Maimah with you. So comes to Friday night, sits down, and he gives him a copy of the Inyana Shel Teisach Hasidus. And they learn it for 6 hours. And these two, they really, left no stone unturned. It was absolutely, probably. Anyway, I learned, Feywish. This is the mice he's telling me in the car. He said, and you know what? I was so nisoida that I decided to write a letter to the Rebbe for the first time in my life. I've never written. And he writes to the Rebbe, this is the signal which I heard, this is my source. Alti Buket, Isidore Twersky, talking about this. And he writes a letter to the Rebbe like this. He says, hey, Yois, since your whole object is to flood the world with Chassidus, you will conquer the world if you take my advice. Hey, Yois, you wrote a biur moide ani. Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod, Chassidus. And how Chassidus gita chayes in Pshat and Remez and Drush and Sod, the ganze Meise. I advise you, I would like to suggest to you, this is what he's writing to the Rebbe. I would like to suggest to you that you do it on every mitzvah. On every mitzvah. And if you will demonstrate Pshat, Remez, Drush and Sod, with the interaction between all these things, you'll be Peyvish the ganze Welt. There's nothing more to talk about. You will have the world. You will have the world. So for 9 months, he gets no answer. And one day, the phone rings. Doret Lebel Grona. Oh, Lebel Grona. I've got an answer for you. The Rebbe said like this. Chuaschein. Poshut ein li zman. Poshut, I don't have the time. Ask Elatzin. Goodbye. So this is a sipur which he told to my son-in-law Buket and in the car, giving him a lift. The Inyana Shel Hasidus was something exceptional. And the nuances and Anyway, so that is a story about why do we bring up in Yodeshet Chassidus? Because you heard it the same time as I did. Your reaction was very poetic. The walls were melting. I didn't exactly see the walls melting. I just felt very personally and privately that this is beyond me. I couldn't take the whole thing in. Still can't. But since then, I've given hundreds of shiurim, maybe not hundreds, dozens, certainly dozens of shiurim on the Yodeshet Chassidus. And each time I learn it, I get a new insight, a new marimokim. The thing which took me out, which really took me out of the Kalim, is that I'm just trying to think now. Do you remember Chotzer is koina? Chotzer is koina mitam yad or mitam, I don't know, mitam Chotzer. Wait, Daladamas, yeah, I'm sorry. Daladamas is koina mishar Chotzer. So the Rebbe explains how the Nigla, so the Chassidus, the Nigla, which is Chotzer, Daladamas, so for Kenyan Daladamas, comes as a result of a Gilui in Chassidus. Why? Because when is the Bailus effective? Well, first of all, go back and sort of try to recollect. The Rabbanon am Geise given in a Simtor, back alley, which is not the Rishus Yochid, not the Rishus Rabbi. The Rabbanon gave to the Simtor that when a Chayfetz falls into this Simtor, and a person is standing nearby, the chidush of Dalad Amos becomes effective. When? Only when the chayfetz falls. If the chayfetz not falling, he has no balance over the Dalad Amos. The trigger for the bilus is the symptom. That's why. Because the Gebonah made a gezerah. Why did they make a gezerah? They made a gezerah because if there's two people around, it'll be a machloikas. So if there'll be machloikas. So in order to diminish the chances of machloikas, they made this gezerah. So how does it work? How does it work? What's the technique? It is because a person has bilus on the Dalad Amos. Why is he Dalad Amos? Because he's reached 3 amas himself, and his hands can stretch another amma. So this is the mahus, golden word, mahus, which doesn't appear in the Bible once. The golden word, the essence, it triggers it. And that is the only gil comes through Chassidus. Yeah, so that was and I think that forget about it. So what we're talking about the Verbrengen. And you said I brought up the idea of it, and that's what was my effect. And I'll tell you something, this has to be learned and relearned and constantly learned. How can you manage it? You can't, it's difficult to manage, but without that, you don't really get a clue in the, I was thinking, Chaim, I'm trying to speak to you, in particle physics, are you familiar?
Not really, no.
Okay, no, a bit. There's enough articles being written about particle physics, which shows an idea in the right way. Now's not the time. I'm just wondering whether there's a phrase in the equivalent of Chassidus, which is called metaphysics. Is there such a thing as meta-particle physics? Okay, I will leave you that with the homework. Going back to Hey Tevis. Hey Tevis is this day when there was an opposition, uncalled for, unwarranted, so ridiculous it was from left field in Gansen. And we spoke a lot about the Rebbe's attitude. The Rebbe is alive and responds. And sometimes the answer is no. But it doesn't affect the necessity for communication. And communication, which we have at this moment, is through this oil, what's it called, this Apple, what's it called, app, yeah. So it's through that. And in these conversations,
Peyvish, I'm sorry, I didn't take in the last sentence. The communication is through what?
The communication is through this app, which is called Oihel. Are you familiar?
Yes.
Right. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that this is constant upward spiraling connection of sensitivity, of knowing what's at stake. What's at stake for the subject, what's at stake for the object, but at stake for the what's at stake for the object is difficult to think about, difficult to think about, even though there's language in Hasidus which does cover these situations and opportunities. So we're saying now, Elohim, and I'm very pleased to met you, and you're in Eretz Yisrael, yes?
Yes, in Ramat Beit Shemesh.
Ramat Beit Shemesh, okay. I'm sure you're doing a lot of good things and treasuring every opportunity of Hashgacha Pratis, because Hashgacha Pratis is it's the nigla, or not nigla, some say it's in the agenda of important aspects. It's a very important thing that people should understand what Hashgacha Pratis is. Yeah, there was a Maisa with a Babasha Chosid. He was standing outside the Rebbe's room, and a man came over, met him. So he thought, this man is the ideal person who I can contact for this and this job or this task, whatever it is. So he was so pious. Because he came into the Rebbe's room, and the Rebbe said to the Rebbe says, B'hashgacha Pratis, I met this person, and he would be. The Rebbe said to him, Was weißt du wegen Hashgacha Pratis? Which is a big disappointment to me, because I think I do know a little about it. And so this becomes, the Hashgacha Pratis, it has to be learned and has to be understood. But besides the Rambams, in the Moed and the Nevuchim, there's 4 daggers of Hashgacha Pratis, and then he goes on to the Rambams later, and then you go into the Baal Shem, and it goes higher and higher in levels of Hashgacha Pratis. But to exaggerate Hashgacha Pratis, I think, is impossible. That means to say, even though Rebbe says, "Boss face to it," I don't understand. Okay, but it has to do with sensitivity. When you're thinking about yourself, it's difficult to encounter someone else in a meaningful way. And the less one thinks about oneself, the more likely one can engage. The spontaneity of engagement to the insensitive person is nil. And the less awareness of self, and that's one of the avoiders which we're all struggling with. And if one reaches a higher level in the recognition of Hashgacha Pratis, it's by the diminution of the self. I mean, even self the Kedusha. I remember Tovshin Yud Tes, Simchas Torah. The Rebbe got up it was Simchas Torah. The Brengen took place whenever, finished about 3 or 4 o'clock. The Rebbe went home for the Suda, and he came back about 5 a.m. And there were, at that time, you would think, it's Tovshin Yud Tes. There were 40 people, Chassidim, around the table opposite Mizrach. The Rebbe was standing on a table opposite Mizrach, facing to Ma'ariv, facing to the doors outside, in the shalash, what was used for Verbrengen, they had this tarpaulin over, Anyway, so the Rebbe was speaking, and he taught the niggun that everyone knows, Shamil's niggun. That was he told that niggun on Tosh in Simchas Torah, 5 a.m. I think 5 a.m. Yeah, 5 a.m. And and the Rebbe had what was his custom, I think. He had a half bottle of Smirnoff vodka in his hand, and anyone who was makabel on themselves to take his sofa in Nimbus Chasidus, he would give them mashka, which of course everybody took. There were 40, 50 people. But this, and I remember Sholem Rozov, he was completely beyond repair. Gewalget on the floor, somewhere near the bottom. And the Rebbe started this niggun, and he told the story, which everybody knows. I'm not going to repeat it. The story that the Moshel, and then the Rebbe ended up with the neshama. The neshama had a she'ifa, a desire to go on high. Aber zayesh mi she'oihev. Don't have to translate what that means. He is. Okay, where are we up to?
Tovshin Yud Tes.
Oh, yeah. So in this niggun, the Rebbe was explaining, it took a long time. He sang the niggun 1 and 2, and even people couldn't get the niggun because the end goes, oh, yeah. It ends, you see, people go like this, which is wrong. The Rebbe tried to correct it a few times. It goes, oh yeah. It goes up. That's the thing. Anyway, so it was trying to correct it, and so this problem of being and being self-abnegation. Self-abnegation is just it's a hoax with words. It's just self-abnegation. It doesn't ring. It doesn't resonate anywhere. It doesn't resonate. Anyway, so this is just a maimer muska. So this was in Tovshin Yud Tes. This was in Tovshin Yud Tes, and so everybody went back, and in fact, it came back for this. For the Verbrengen, the Rebbe spent more time on teaching this niggun, and this is I don't know which words to use. I don't want to use Yiddish. I don't want to use Hebrew. I don't want to use English, because this doesn't say what the reality is. The reality is reserved for every single individual to interpret that reality if he accepts this notion, what we're talking about. So it's a very highly subjective thing. And the problems of speaking, you know, there's a famous Maisa with two Hasidim in the old days when they came to see each other after 20 years. Okay. And they said, they come to meeting, they're gonna meet. Fine. So what do? They put a bottle of mashka on the table. Fine. Poured out 2 glasses of mashka. And each one, Chavedim, haven't seen each other 20 years. They looked at each other and looked at each other and looked at each other and cried and looked at each other. And after a couple of hours, they poured the mashka back into the bottle. Zehu. You see, I know when I'm teaching people, I say that God created the world with the Hebrew language. He said, how do I know? Bereshis. So who said Bereshis? Who said Bereshis? Who said it? Yeah, it was the Eibishter who instructed Moshe Rabbeinu to write down Bereshis. Okay. The Borelikim? What was it? What happened? Then he goes on. There was a Horus. What was the land? All that stuff. And God said, Yehi Oher. So that's the first thing. He said, Yehi Oher, Yehi Oher, Yehi Oher. You see, I would like to communicate with people by just looking at people and feeling that they're looking at me and we're engaging. Because once I say something, it's just not it. Maybe I'm saying this here.
Rabbi Vogel.
One second, L'chaim. Are you saying L'chaim there?
L'chaim muss man sagen. You touched on Ashgacha Pratis. So Ashgacha Pratis, the shir in Ashgacha Pratis we've begun now, and we can continue, and I hope to continue learning more about Ashgacha Pratis from you. I'll tell you what Ashgacha Pratis. You mentioned before Derech Hamuna. How did Derech Hamuna come to hate Tevis? Why was that safer? You mentioned it before. So, I'd like to just use this as a springboard to bring out a certain point. That the Rebbe told Rabbi Krinsky, soll sein gesund und stark, before going to the oil on Beis Kislev, that he should be there when the Sfarim come, and he should open up one of the boxes and pull out a sefer, and whatever sefer he pulls out, he should bring with him to the oil. And Rabbi Klein, Oliver Sholem, drove the Rebbe to the oil on Beis Kislev. And then when the Sfarim came back, they were taken into Maskiris, and Rabbi Krinsky, Rosein Gesund und Stark, opened up one of the boxes and took, I'm sorry, the Rebbe said to take 3 Sfarim, and it was, the Rebbe Peyvish told him not to look what he's taking. Take 3 Sfarim and bring them to the oil. And Hitake drove to the oil, and he brought them there. And he was the one that drove the Rebbe back, and the Rebbe, and one of those Farim was the Derech Hamuna, which the Rebbe had geheißen zu drucken. So the Hashgacha Pratis, which at Hashgacha Pratis, that if that came out, the Rebbe geheißen das drucken. You know, a few days ago came the Sefer Teres Menachem Chelik Ein Aleph, And over there, in Shvat, Tovshin Lamed Gimel, there's a sikha over there by the Fabrengen, where Zalman Shazar gives the Rebbe 2 kisvei yad, one from the Alter Rebbe, one from the Mittler Rebbe, and he tells the Rebbe that now that he's giving the Rebbe these 2 kisvei yad, it's basically his oitzer of kisvei yad is emptying out. And the Rebbe told him that he hopes that from emptying out his oitzer, that sich onfilm mer sfarim and afotzam mayonis everywhere else. And then he sort of complains to the Rebbe that he was in Boston by visiting Yashaber, who knows what's going on, and how come he didn't know about the sfarim, the salcho liozna that was printed a while ago. And there was a pelle, etc. And there was Rebbe told him that it's taka pelle that he didn't know about it. But the bottom line is that every sefer has to be printed, and the more that's revealed, the more goes out. You mentioned before, it's everything's Ashgacha Pratis. You mentioned before about Kuntis Inon Shoter Sachsidus that Rabbi Sachs, Olav Sholem, translated. It's a Choiv Kodesh these days that such a thing is found and is printed with a shturim. Sorry for the Rebbe, for Chassidus, and obviously the fact that he just passed away. This would be a tremendous way of Taka bringing Chassidus to the Welt in a truly amazing way. Als es doch Ashgacha Pratis, hey Tevis hat der Rebbe doch geheißen Sturmen, und auf Kefnusfarim, Tonnensfarim, und so Tag verbunden mit Sfarim. So this is it. I mean, if Derech Hamuna was pulled out of a box and that was the Ashgacha Pratis to be printed. And you mentioned this Kuntes Inon Shoter Sachsidus, which can now sei mehetes von dir, Baruch Hashem, sei from Rabbi Faro, with all the tiurim of what it was like, having it printed now in English with a new translation from Yemol to Altzedach Ashgacha Pratis. It laid for many years, and now is for sure the time to make sure to print it.
I would second that suggestion. I think it's an amazing idea. And I think if it's done Ilui Nishmas, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrona Livracha, there are thousands of people who would want to acquire such a sefer and learn it. Ilui Nishmas.
Story. Because it's excessive drinking, you know. It just anyway. Look, it's in hand. I don't want to tell you what the hand is. It's a problematic hand. Anyway, it looks. There's a few problems associated with that, but hopefully we'll get over it. And please God, with the brachas and good wishes from all the people assembled. Mitzvah Hashem.
Long as l'chaim for them. That's something to say l'chaim for. L'chaim. In this discussion, by the way, with Shazar and the Rebbe, this Twersky that you mentioned before is also mentioned in this discussion.
How?
Let me bring it up. I have it in front of me. One second.
Well. Knowledge is not what you know, but where to find it. Okay.
Yes, there you are. Here.
Okay.
He says to the Rebbe like this. He tells the Rebbe about the pgisha he had with Rabbi Yoshe Ber, shetomid medaber b'hislavus oidos teres Chabad, heichel milimudu be'aldusa b'chaslavich eitzel melamed Chabadnik, v'ad hayom yoinik mimayonis elu, and as marbet to bring the droshes of the Alter Rebbe, L'kutei Torah, and Shazar was upset that Rabbi Yoshe Ber lo yira me'olam esifrei mamori admur azok and sachol liozna shenitus u'miksavet kedesh mikvar. Anyway, it goes back and forth, and the Rebbe says Zedvar Pele Etzli, because in Boston is da Gersa Kvutza von Anash, was treffen sich mit ihm verbringen, mevim lo inyonei tfus. And it says over there that Shazar mentioned that in this meeting, it was also his Eidim, Rabbi Yitzchak Osher Tversky, and the Rebbe had gesagt, hat mir schon einmal erzählt about his Histatfus in a Chug Limud Achsidis, which happens by you. As sagt der Rebbe zu Shazar. Hashgacha Pratis the Sefer was just came to everyone's home a few days ago.
Okay, let me say, if we're now trading Hashgacha Pratis, I want to give you another problem. People, maybe the few people, Tali knows about this. There's a magazine which is called Tradition. Tradition is put out still to this day, I think. I saw a copy recently. It's put out by the Rabbinical Council of America, RCA. It is YU dominated, okay? And Rabbi Sachs wrote an article in Tradition something like 20, 30 years ago. And he wrote a 25-page article he took Rabbi Soloveitchik's book, The Lonely Man of Faith, and he wrote a précis of that book, which took up about 6 pages. So he wasn't shying away from quoting JB in the fullest way. And then he said, but I would like to offer an alternative perspective. And in the next 6, 8 pages, whatever it was, he wrote a perspective of Chabad, Perek Lamed Beis in Tanya, and he concludes that with the Sikha, which the 10 Meraglim went out, and they said what they did, what they did, and so this Sikha, he claims, is the answer to JB's perspective on the lonely man of faith, which is no majestic man. You know, people who've read outside Chabad know read JB. I think it's one of the books that people read. I've never read it, but people do read it. And he said, and here we have a classic example that even though these spies, Yehoshua and Kalev, were men of faith, they were not lonely. And that's the end of the article. Now, what's the problem? I saw another copy of Tradition printed at a later date, and it's an analysis of JB's Torah, and that part is excluded. So there's been some rethink or rewrite, and I'm talking to Tali mainly because I think I needed to use this article for some correspondence which I have with some people. So I'll tell you the whole story. If you read the Jewish news, which nobody reads, the Jewish news, it's one of those free newspapers, which you can pick up from any grocery store free. And they claim that they have more readership than the Jewish Chronicle. Okay? This is only addressed to people who understand what I'm talking about. And they published an article 2 weeks ago by a rabbi, and this is Rabbi Farrow, maybe you'd know something about this. A Rabbi Taragin, Moshe Taragin. He he's a Rosh Yeshiva in one of these YU yeshivas in Etzion, where it was something like that. Can you help me? Rabbi Faro. Okay.
So you're saying that Jewish News published an article by Moshe Taradin?
Yeah.
And what was
what was the article? I'm sorry. What was the article?
right?
This article is to help non-Hasidim celebrate Yud Tes Kislev. And they found it very difficult because a full-page article in the Jewish News of a week or 2 or 3 ago. I wrote a letter to him, congratulating him on his article. It was just this week, early this week. So I don't know what's going on, but in the big mix of Afatzamayonis, the most sensitive, respectful audience are to be found among YU graduates, and there's Ganze Tenua, the whole movement. And he got smicha from the YU, and he's been in City College, he's been around, but he's in Israel now. So, but if somebody meets Chaim Faro, he's gone. But so if you can get that message to him, because maybe you could pick it up the contact. Anyway, let's be mesameach, let's be joyful and happy. Ashreinu matov chelkeinu. Sounds, Ashreinu matov chelkeinu, it just sound kind, Ashreinu matov chelkeinu. It's kind of a exclusive club type of, and in today's world, you're supposed to be more giving and open and not exclusive. So that's a problem which we all have. If you don't have the problem, it's fine, But if you do have the problem is shared by other people too. And this is one of the unique, this is the ultimate paradox. The ultimate paradox was coined by Rabbi Moses Cordovera, known as the Ramak. I'm not sure, it could be somebody else because it's a Sefer Avodas Yisrael. Please help me, Shaul, if you know the authorship of this. Tali, you should know the authorship of. And it's
Rabbi Moshe Dikatilia.
No, it's I don't know.
Meir Dikatilia.
No, it's not. I don't know. Anyway, he said the ultimate paradox.
And he's the author of the Derech Emunah as well.
Derech Emunah. Oh, no. This Derech Emunah just now was that ever brought? No, it's not. It's not that. Oh, it doesn't matter. The thing is this. We, as we get older, understand, tolerate more dichotomies and paradoxes within our own behavior and within the behavior of others. That is a process which starts when you're 2 years old and 3 years old, and initially you don't want to tolerate anything or anybody, and then you go into education, which sadly God brought the Nefesh L'Kis late. And always remember that Akdima Tanose. There was an opinion which existed before you came into this world. And you are a antidote, postscript. You're just an extra. But the firm case for the world being a world has been established. Klipo Kodmo Lepri. I don't know if you can follow me once. It follows the line. And he said, כשם שיש לכוח בבלי גבול, כך ויש לכוח בגבול ימין אתה אומגן, אתה מכסה משלימוס. God is not great. That's not the, it's not, that's a secondary matter. Secondary matter. The idea is shlemus, perfection. And that perfection goes from the very source, the very core.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Goes down into the very fiber of our existence. This is who we are. A dichotomy, a paradox, never to be resolved. Never, ever to be resolved. If you want to get out of the ship now, you can exit. This is which we live in. And the more ability of ours, when we're talking to another Jew, to see him as an equal, which is very difficult. That is, to that degree, this success in the engagement, in the hafotzes mayonis of what we're trying to practice. And if there's a grain of intolerance because of superiority, real or imaginary, real or imaginary, real or imaginary, probably more imaginary than real, but that can be discussed. This is, and one grows older, one sees this bigger world, a bigger picture, until we see the biggest picture of all when we're informed about it, but when we can integrate that perspective into daily behavior, integration into our psyche, which cannot be delayed because you can't wait until a person gets older, because the Rebbe is in a hurry. I remember a thought from Rabbi Duo from Sholem. He was talking the reverse. He said, the Alter Rebbe gesagt, I can't see where, he said like this, Va'avadetem mehero, du sollst verlenden dem eilerisch. You should destroy the hurry. Well, so everything is a matter. Everything is for every quote I give, you can give another quote, which is opposite. And that's all right. That's all right. The challenge is to live in both worlds at the same time. And live properly. As I said, we'll say, woman is darf man sein in Ganzen, and at the same time, look, it's Hey Tavis. When it happened, Hey Tavis, 40 years ago, 30, whenever it happened, it was one moment. I looked at it in one way. And the older I get, I look at it in a different way. And every one of us is older than the year previously. And the sense of maturity is not certain, because a person can set his maturity into reverse. If I'm talking too obliquely, Sally, you can tell me, is this too oblique? Obviously, we share the same experience. We've got this position, and therefore, Leman Hashem. When I say about social vision, okay, I've got a social vision. But I'll tell you the social vision, which I showed everybody before, this is a pool. It's a foster mayonis, and it's a foster mayonis which gets to grip. It's not milmaila matter. Too many things we read is milmaila matter. Except Shema Yisrael was not milmaila matter. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, was in response to the suspicion of Yaakov Avinu, who said, wait a minute, maybe there's something wrong. Oh, no, Shema Yisrael, Hashem. It's the recognition that there's always going to be a matter, and always going to be a matter. This is the Bria. This is the whole Bria. You can't have part. You can't live in part. You have to live everywhere to the degree it's permissible, but in your mind to recognize that there are this dichotomy. Anyway, genug geredet. I've got a shir tomorrow morning. I wish everybody l'chaim, sei gesund, and that's it. L'chaim.